Hey, welcome back. So today the topic of discussion is obliterating the pigeonhole and the insanity of freelance photography. Now where that comes from is my 20 odd years of frustration of typecasting. I think that's what they call it in the creative industries. Actors that can only be comedians, or actors that can only be action heroes. It's a little bit like that in photography as well. If you're a fashion photographer, there's no way you could be a landscape photographer. Or if you're a food photographer, what do you know about fine art photography? How could you do fine art? And it's that lunacy around freelance photographers in particular, constantly having to prove themselves and having a portfolio always cooked to the max, which proves they can take pictures using aperture, shutter, white balance and ISO, regardless of what they're pointing it at. And I kind of realised very early on in my photography career that if I wanted to earn money, I'd have to kind of be the jack of all trades, be able to point the camera at anything to make money. And boy, have I done that over the 20 years. I'll talk you through some of my more kind of outlandish exploits with the camera. But it's a pattern, and it's the creative world we live in, where photographers, I mean, I've been guilty of doing this myself, pigeonhole myself into, I'm a portrait photographer or a fashion photographer. And you see it a lot. You see a lot of photographers that have on their website, people photographer, portrait photographer, architect, whatever it is. And really, I bet you, with the exception of maybe 0.5% of photographers in the world, everybody shoots a bit of everything, and nobody really specialises in one thing. Even the specialists don't only shoot one thing. And it's something we've kind of like, again, it goes back to my more recent podcast where I talked about how photographers consistently shoot themselves in the foot, and pigeonholing themselves is another way they do that. I have been guilty of that myself, and I've tried not to do it over the years, because the rule of thumb is that when you become a photographer, to get high-end work in any avenue within photography, you've got to specialise in it. And that's what the people in those areas kind of want. If they want a fashion photographer, they don't want to look on your website and see pictures of dogs. They want to see that you can photograph people in outfits. And while I get that, I understand the mentality of that, the reality is that most photographers, particularly those of us that have been doing this for a long time, can photograph anything to a good degree, or to an excellent degree. So what I thought I'd do for this podcast, I'm going to base this off a blog I wrote a couple of months ago, and I've kind of taken all my blogs down. And once I started podcasting, I thought, because my lad Logan had talked me into becoming a podcaster, not a blogger, I took the blogs down because I thought people don't want to read it if they've listened to it. So I'm going to kind of like use it to refresh my memory as I go through. I mean, this was a 4,000 word blog, which is pretty much a dissertation essay on my experience from starting from scratch as a photographer in 2005 up until the point where I felt competent and I could point my camera at anything and get a similar or same quality from that process. And hopefully you'll find it interesting. Hopefully you'll not make some of the same pitfalls I made, but it's quite an interesting journey. When I look back and wrote the blog, I thought, Christ, I forgot I'd done that. Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. While I'm talking through my experience and how I pigeonholed myself and unpigeonholed myself, I'm going to show you some of my development work, and some of my early work is pretty horrendous, and I make no apologies for it. I was learning, and I've kind of been lucky enough to work with amazing people from the very start of my career. Models, makeup artists, studio owners. But so when I talk about the early years, I don't want you thinking I'm being derogatory to anybody, particularly not the models. The models are always fabulous. It was me that was crap. But I kind of equate it to a Sunday League mentality, and we'll get into that, and how I got out of the Sunday League into the Premier League, I think. and the steps I took, the realizations I had along the way, which helped me do that. So I'll start with my my entry into photography, which is in 2005, and I kind of knew straight away I wanted to be a people photographer, because I'd kind of got into photography by watching people be photographed and watching their interactions. And I was a people. Well, I am a people person now. I was more so than a people person, and the idea of pointing your camera at somebody and getting their persona to come across kind of really appealed to me. So I kind of knew early on what I wanted to specialise in, if you like. I wasn't quite sure what part of that I wanted to specialise in any particular area. I just knew I really wanted to work with people. I didn't want to photograph trees or flowers or things that don't communicate back to you. So that was kind of I was looking at, how do I get into photographing people, make a living out of it. But I then also, at that point in my life, I'd pretty much been a freelancer my whole career, apart from a few years out of school where I did day jobs. I'd been lucky enough to kind of like hold my own, as it was. Struggled sometimes, struggled a lot of times, but liked working for myself. I like being my own boss. I like being able to make the decisions. And as you get older and wiser, you kind of tend to realise that there's not that much difference in working for yourself for somebody than working directly for somebody. But anyway, at that point I wanted to be a freelancer, so that's what I did. I tried to be a freelance photographer, and in some aspects of that I kind of ran before I could walk, and I'll talk about some of that as we go along. So, you know, I came at photography from a funny angle. I'd not been into photography, although I'd always taken pictures like everybody. When I was a musician, we had a band, and we always used to do, you know, the press photos and all that. I was always intrigued as to how the pictures looked. They never looked like I thought they was going to look. I always thought that we looked slightly better on camera than I thought we actually looked in person or in the situation we were being photographed in. And it kind of always intrigued me that how photography can kind of do that. But I was never into photography like, you know, you get those people that I was born with a camera in my hand. It was never me. I was never that person. But I've always been highly creative. And so when I had to stop being a musician because I got hearing damage, I spent years, lots of years, trying to find my creative output in life, and it ended up being photography, quite by accident. But once I'd found it, I kind of realised I needed to look at who the best people were. It's a bit like when you're a musician, you're always thinking, right, whose album sounds the best? Where's the best producers? Who's making the best work? It's a little bit like that in photography. I was looking for the Eddie Kramer and the George Martin of photography. So I kind of settled quite early on David Bailey from a people photography standpoint, and I think more because I liked his attitude than actually liked his pictures, although I do like his work. I like his honest kind of, it is what it is kind of approach. That cheeky chappy, look, I'm doing it my way or you can piss off, kind of really rung true with me because I'm a little like that myself. So David Bailey was a big influence in terms of approach and energy, I think is the word I'm looking for. And the kind of opposite side of that was more people like Ansel Adams in his particular detail, or his attention to detail, and how he spent years fine-tuning processes so his work was not only first class but it was repeatable. And that's something that stuck with me ever since, the process. But it took me a little while to get to the point where I had any process and I wasn't just going, oh wow, that's an amazing picture. So I started kind of looking around and trying to get inspirations, and I got a crappy digital camera, which I don't even know what it was. It was a Fuji Finepix something or other from the early 2000s. It was terrible. Shot really ropey JPEGs. Didn't have much. I think it must have been a bridge camera because it didn't have much manual function. And started photographing people with it very unsuccessfully. But what I did at that time was, because the internet was kind of coming through and internet forums was becoming popular, I started signing up for internet forums where you could book models or you could listen to photography chat. And I started learning kind of by myself, by massive errors, but looking on internet forums and model websites to find people to work with. and kind of got going really quickly, which is why I say I was running before I could walk. But I realised after, I don't know, feels like it was probably a year and a half, but it might even have been less than that. I kind of realised that I've become very good at being crap. And by crap, I mean, I'll show you some photographs from early 2000 and, well, when was this? This is a picture. Lloyd's a great model, by the way. None of this is his fault. What does it say? What date we got on that? So this is September 2006. So I've been going probably about 9 months at this point. And you can see this picture of Lloyd here. And I think from memory I was trying to be creative. The white background's not blue by error. The white background's blue because let me just turn my fan off on the computer because that's really going to get on my nerves. So I took this picture of Lloyd, and I must have put a blue filter on to make it look funky. Why, looking back, I did that? I mean, I was also going through this phase of doing everything on the Dutch. Have you heard that term? It's a film term where they shoot on the Dutch. Sometimes works really well, but on this occasion, I'm not convinced. I mean, this is an edit as well, quite an embarrassing edit, and I can see what I was trying to do, but it was kind of indicative of the pictures I was taking at the time, and people on the forums who were inspiring me, and it's pretty crap, let's say. But out of that set, I did get some pictures which were good, so I think I was starting to realise that's from the same day, same set. And although this is a more modern edit, I re-edited this a few months ago just to see what was what. I was starting to get on the right lines. I mean, I had a little bit of underexposure going on, and the colour was off a little bit, but, you know, from a pose, a composition point of view, I was starting to get better. And I was, you know, probably realising around then that the internet forums are all very well, but I equate it to the Sunday League. So I've seen a lot of the Sunday League in my time. Back in the day when I was a young lad, used to play a bit of football, used to go and watch that level all the time. And my lad Logan plays Sunday League, under 14s, 15s, 16s, but so not a bad level to be fair. But I'm talking about Sunday League players like in the 30s and 40s who have got beer bellies and who love it, but aren't very good at it, but sometimes think they're very good at it. And I was kind of equating, I wanted to be Lionel Messi, and I was in a Sunday League team, and the internet forums were very Sunday League. So I can distinctly remember when I started thinking I need to get myself off these forums, and it was probably early to mid 2007. So I've been going, I think around 18 months. Well, like I said, I had these feelings for a little bit, and you know, I could walk into a studio to make a setup, take a picture. My edit process was all over the place. I went through a period of kind of like semi-saturating everything, so everything looked kind of like orange instead of brown. And the internet people were saying, "Oh, great, this is great. We love this kind of." But I was thinking in the back of my mind, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm winging this, and this is shit. Because I kind of know from industry, I know from music that for things to be good and valuable, you've got to be able to repeat them. You've got to be able to do it again to the same standard. And I wasn't. My work was all over the place. So that Sunday League kind of like equation stuck in my head, and I started to think, how am I going to get out of the Sunday League by just playing with Sunday League players? I need to up my game somehow. And you know, these Sunday League players were great. They were all really nice people, really, really nice people. But many of them were really nice people, patting each other on the back for making horrendous or at the best mediocre work. And I felt that I was never going to get past that if I didn't come out of that and retreat from that. So that's what I did. I stopped kind of frequenting those places. I deleted all my accounts, took myself out of there, and started reading more and watching documentaries more, because YouTube was quite fledgling, and then there was one or two things starting to appear on YouTube. And I started looking back and looking through magazines and trying to more kind of accurately mimic them. And around this time, I'd kind of I got myself into a situation where I was shooting lots of glamour, so underwear stuff, lads mag type stuff, which was, in all fairness, pretty easy. You need one light, a decent enough looking model, and a little bit of luck and you're away. So I found it really easy, but it was boring, in fact. And my friends, even to this day, if they find out that I've shot that kind of stuff, they always, "Oh, it must have been great, it must have been brilliant." Well, it depends what your motives are. My motives are always, I wanted to be a great photographer. And I look at it this way: if I was a car photographer and I was photographing a Mini or I was photographing a Ferrari, it wouldn't matter to me which one it was. I'm there to do the best job I can with what's in front of me, to make the lighting great, the composition great, what people see connect. So even as an heterosexual male, photographing women in underwear, and often less, didn't appeal to me as such as photographing somebody's interesting face and getting their personality to come across, and having people look at that photograph and go, "Oh wow, he's really nailed that." And most of my mates and friends and family never understood that was how I felt, but the truth is that's how I did feel, and I feel the same now. Naked male, naked woman, car, toaster, it matters not to me. If I'm making photographs for whatever reason, I'm involved in that reason, not the thing. And while there does have to be a connection, particularly I think when you're shooting portraits and you want people to give you themselves, and I agree with David Bailey on this, actually. Actors are quite difficult to photograph and photograph their personalities well, because you never bloody know which personality you're getting from, because they're actors. But it kind of dawned on me that the easy glamour studio backdrop or a couch, one light, loads of Photoshop was too easy. I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't going anywhere. I felt like I was just repeating myself. And so I started backing off from that a little bit and started, or I tell a lie, I didn't back off from it initially. I boxed it to make some money from it, of it. So I carried on doing it to make some money. But outside of that, I started making sure that my content was a bit more aligned to what I wanted to do as a photographer, where I wanted to be. So alongside that, I started just being an absolutely real critique for myself, because I was looking at other people's pictures and thinking to myself, "Oh God, they're crap." But I wasn't really doing that to myself. So I started, being critically analysing my own work, and I was analysing it alongside my peers. So the Baileys, the Avedons, the Penns, all those people who were world famous photographers who you could see were making ultimate work. I started looking at mine and going, "Is it that?" And it wasn't. So I needed to find ways to get there. So I put masses of time and energy into books, journals, YouTube videos, documentaries, anything I could get my hands on, which kind of taught me more about those people and their work processes, really. And very quickly I start to leave the Sunday League behind. Start to think, yeah, I'm above this now. And I realised, I think, that being Lionel, I'm not saying I'm as good as Lionel Messi, but it's just a comparison. Being, I don't know, let's say a first division footballer playing in Sunday League, you're kind of clearly above the players you're playing with, but you're never going to get out of that because you're playing at that level. If you put that first division player in a team with Messi or Ronaldo or Steve Gerrard or any of those great players, suddenly that player picks up on things, learns tricks. And that's kind of what I was starting to do. I stopped paying any attention at all to the Sunday League and what was going on there, on the internet particularly. I looked into the real world, something that still happens today actually, and tried to get sucked up into that kind of way of thinking. And it quite quickly I did actually become sucked up into that way of thinking. And it's really strange because around that time I'd actually started mentoring people, giving one-to-one tuition, because I'd running before I could walk, set myself up a studio with no clue, I had no reason, no kind of justification for me to be a studio owner at that point. But I did, because that's kind of how I am. And I was seeing people come behind my studio that didn't know how to even put a light on. So I was doing lots of one-to-one tuition, and quickly realising then that I was better than 90% of my peers, which was a strange kind of sensation, given I'd only been going 18 months, less than 2 years. So when I'm looking back at that archive from around 2007-8, I can begin to see that my people photography kind of takes a big leap in terms of quality and regularity. I stopped being hit and miss. I stopped the picture I showed you of Lloyd. It stopped being a good picture 1 minute and horrendous the next. It became a bit more predictable, and that in turn kind of inspired me on to try harder and do more and learn more and become even better. So from a technical standpoint, I'd become much better. From a critical analysis of my own work, I'd become much better. And I was starting around that time to realise that it was no good coming into a studio, setting up, doing it, looking on Photoshop and going, well, I'll boost this and I'll boost that and I'll boost other. Because I really didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of looking at the screen open. I could push my pictures to a certain place. And while they did to a certain extent, I wasn't really able to repeat it. And by that I mean, if somebody had come to me and said, oh, Lance, I love what you did in that last picture, what did you do? I wouldn't have been able to exactly repeat it. I've got it somewhere. But I realised, particularly listening to Ansel Adams and the real high-end retouchers, that being able to reproduce and fine-tune to the nth percentage of a degree was what you needed to do from a client perspective. If they're coming and saying, oh, that's brilliant, but just like 5% less brightness would be great. So I took a deep breath and stopped and started to think, right, what am I doing with my files? Once I'm shooting, I've kind of nailed the studio thing a bit. I can set up, I can get nice results in camera, but what am I doing after that? And we'll talk about what I did then in a sec. Before I go on to talk about editing the digital stuff and getting into Photoshop and editing properly, I'm just going to look back through a bit of that other stuff. So when I said I was doing a little off brownie kind of desaturated thing, this is one from then, and you can tell, I mean, the focus on that is horrendous. I mean, I know what I was trying to do. I was there. And I can see where I was heading and what I was trying to do. I'm still using the Dutch thing. The model was great. I worked with Brooke Misha a lot over the years, and she improved a lot as a model. But you can see again, I'm going for that. I mean, that horrible border and the name on it is, that was the name of my studio at the time, is horrendous. But I mean, just ignore the focus. What's the lighting doing? I mean, look at the legs. Oh God, I can't look at that anymore. But you see, that was my Sunday League mentality, and a few of these are kind of from around that time. This was a really highly processed image. I mean, look, there's no detail around in the face. What's going on here? I mean, wanging sliders around open for the best. That was from the same set, funnily enough. So I was kind of starting to get somewhere, but not always. Very hit and miss. And again, these are kind of like 2007. And Becky was another model I worked with loads over the years. And I'll show you some better stuff I did with Becky later. But what's that? That's horrendous, isn't it? That's just like amateur hour. So that's Sunday League kind of stuff there. And you can see, we'll go through some of that work in a sec. But that was the Sunday League stuff. And part of that that discovery, that realisation for me was, editing wise, I was looking at a screen, and a real cheap laptop or something at the time. I didn't have much money. There's no way it was a decent machine, and probably colour balance would have been all over. I didn't understand what a histogram was then, and I was just kind of guessing, moving things around until I thought it looked great, and then bang, it was saved and it was off. So I wondered, what can I do? YouTube was in its infancy. There was some tutorials on there, but they felt Sunday League to me. And then somehow, I don't know how, I stumbled across a chap called Guy Gowan, who was still a real prominent guy when it comes to digital files and editing, and he's done loads of stuff over the years. He's been a consultant for Adobe for a long time, and I just happened across his workshop and got into that and saw how he explained why you should do what he was doing. How he explained in simple terms what he was doing and why, what it did to your file, what you were trying to achieve or what you should be trying to achieve, just really hit on with me. And many of those processes I learned late 2007, early 2008, have stuck with me, and I might have modified them slightly in one or two ways since, but the basics of it are still what I learned from Guy's workshop then. And the massive jump in quality of edit and being able to repeat that edit almost overnight. Well, it looks like it coincided with my work getting better, but it was the reason for my work getting better. So I kind of kept following Guy over the years, and I watched a few of his more recent thoughts and tutorials, and he's still nailing it. After all these years, he's still nailing it. And I would trust him from a editing perspective before anybody. His understanding of file types, because he came from industry and from the old school way of doing things with drum scanners. What Guy doesn't know and understand about digital files and digital editing and the whys and wherefores, it isn't worth knowing. So, if you've done nothing else, go and check him out. You can get him on YouTube, Guy Gowan. I'll go look at his website, join his website, and the man's a genius, really. So that kind of knowledge helped me push my work on and get much better. So from around 2008, the quality of my work, or the regularity of my work, began to improve and get much better. And you can kind of see on this one here, we now have a picture that's in focus for a start. That's a good start, isn't it? In focus, well framed, well shot, model looks great, exposure looks hot on this screen, but it's not when you look at the histogram, and the colour balance is good. So I've got all the kind of things coming together in a picture that I've not had previously, and you can see from that whole set, if we flick through them, that I hate windows. Do you know, I do hate windows. That they'll retain the same kind of qualities. I might shoot them slightly different now and edit them slightly differently now, but the process is beginning to come through. And you can see on this set of Misha here in the windows, again, there's some styles starting to develop there. We're starting to get decent exposure, decent composition, decent edit, in focus. I always loved this shot. I just thought it was casually waiting for me to set up and just took it. I've always looked like that shot. I would have done it differently now. I would have lit the background different, but for then, 2008, still learning, pretty clueless. I'll take that. And again, they're quite a boring set, really. Just trying a bit of lifestyle stuff, but again, think about that and then look at stuff from 18 months earlier, and I think you'll agree, same model, there's a bit of a difference in quality. And that just came from the decision to get out of the Sunday League. How can I do it? Reading lots, looking at lots, being harsh on myself, listening to somebody who clearly knew what they were talking about in terms of digital editing, and putting myself together a workflow. And around that time, I haven't got much of it on here to show you. It's on another hard drive which I haven't got with me. And start to shoot more stuff like skies and hills and trees and things that weren't just people, because I'd realised if I wanted to be able to shoot everything, I had to learn how to shoot everything. But also, in the north of England, there's not that much work when it comes to photographing people. So you've got to diversify. You've got to be able to do other things. And strangely enough, one of the things I did around that time, maybe slightly before, was photograph 20 coffins. For an undertaker. And I didn't have a studio big enough at the time to get all his stuff in, so we shot it at his undertaker's yard, right next to the fridge, with all the corpses in. And it was a bit of a strange experience, let's say. But I did it, and I learned a lot about myself and my approach to photography from doing stuff like that. Bizarre shoot, photographing coffins in an undertaker's. Also around that time, I started doing some corporate work around Manchester and Stalybridge, where I was living at the time. And I wasn't the best photographer at it, but I was learning. And although I probably shouldn't have been charging for it, I did get handsomely paid for a few gigs then, because, you know, councils are like, they don't know how to not spend money. So it was kind of fun. I was learning. I was getting stuff together. And then I feel around probably mid-2008, I really started to be able to set up and shoot and get decent pictures every time. And I still love this set of a model called Joanne. Just some crazy swimwear set, and we went for a real high retouch kind of look, and you can see in her face. So her face was airbrushed by a makeup artist, but then I've added some smoothness and stuff to it. And you can see the set, how they kind of still work quite nicely, I think. When you consider what I was doing a few months earlier, it kind of feels around that time I was starting to become good at repeating myself. And Rachel, Emily is another model I've worked with loads over here. This is from roughly around the same time, and you can see again I'm starting to get a kind of aesthetic, which is what all photographers should be aiming for in their work, where you've lit nicely, you've posed nicely, your edit's nice, you've not left anything ropey there, you've not over sharpened, you've not underexposed. All those kind of things are starting to come together. So, you know, I was working really hard now and starting to think I'm going in the right direction, but I need to do more. So what I tried to do from that point was I tried to work with people who were more experienced, work with people who got a bit more savvy, a bit more experience. I kind of leached onto people who came across, who I met, who were clearly better. And then working with high-end makeup artists and stylists and companies that have got precious things they want photographing, kind of sucks you into that level. It's a bit like I said before about the first division player playing with Messi gets better because of watching that experience. And surrounding yourself by the right people and totally detaching yourself from the Sunday league is what really started to advance my work further. And then again, from that, I was starting to get work across many areas of photography. I've moved on from the coffins, but I was doing jewellery. I was doing things like e-commerce. I'd started to do. That's something I learned myself. E-commerce in terms of clothes, and then also e-commerce in terms of things like what do they call it? Pack shot stuff. And I was starting to kind of I feel, become a bit of a jack of all trade photographer who was getting better at some things, and shooting some things that I didn't even really understand what they were initially, but learning as I went along and having a keen interest in things outside of people. So architecture photography, the skies are something I started noticing and photographing a lot. I was really trying to kind of be as versatile as I could without yet being really good in some areas, but being well enough to get paid to do it and get quite handsomely paid in some respects. Always running before I can walk. That's just the nature of me. And eventually I started to get pretty decent at all of the genres. I'll insert some of this stuff as I'm talking. I don't have it here, but I'll insert it in the edit so you can see. We're just looking through sort of my older kind of bits and bobs, which are like what you might call product photography. I started doing weddings around that time, some events. I've photographed airplanes, cars. I remember once photographing a Porsche and having to myself reverse the Porsche into the smallest studio space you've ever seen, but eventually getting it in there, getting the lights set up. One big learning curve from that is a silver Porsche reflects lots. So it took me probably twice as long to retouch out all the reflections off the studio roof and stuff than it did to do the bloody photograph in the first place. But it was a big learning curve, and it helped me when I came to do other things. So probably everything between 2009 2012, everything you can think about in the photography kind of arena, I will have photographed. Trains, planes, automobiles, flat lay, game consoles. Yeah, over those years I'd started to photograph absolutely everything and getting decently paid for it, and kind of started to kind of like destroy the pigeonhole at that point because I predominantly photographed people and I was getting the glamour work and I was getting headshot work. I'd now started to get this other work, and although I still kind of like sold myself as a people photographer, I was probably earning more money doing the other stuff. And it kind of it reminded me then, it reminds me now thinking about it, that good photographers, good practicing hard photographers can turn their hand to anything. And should be given that chance to prove themselves. And a lot of companies are fearful, I think, of giving photographers a chance to prove themselves without having the proof. Quite often you'll see photography jobs advertised and it will say something like must have portfolio to back up. And I think some people want the most obscure things photographing. Coffins, for an example. I got that gig because I knew somebody who knew somebody, and I'm quite forceful at selling myself like that. But I'd never photographed a coffin before. I'd never photographed anything like a coffin before. But by that time I kind of knew what exposure was, I knew how lights worked, I knew what composition was about. I did some research on what other coffins were photographed like and understood what they would kind of want, and did a good job and got paid well for it. So, my ethos is always give the photographer a chance. Don't bin somebody off just because they haven't got that specific thing that you're wanting in your catalogue or whatever it is you want. Another job I did was I did some bespoke jewellery once. I'd never not even got anything like any jewellery in my portfolio at the time, but I think what happened was I got lots of people, and the jewellery was to be photographed on people. So I think I got around that by them seeing I could photograph people, and I came up with a real good concept which they liked. So I think that sold it as well. But I have, applied for jobs and not got them because I haven't got that specific thing in my portfolio, and I think it's a bit of a piss of that. I think it's the wrong way to look at photography. Just because you're an awesome sports photographer or street photographer or photojournalist or studio photographer doesn't mean you can't turn your hand to something else. Photography is photography is photography. There are 4 components and experience that come together to make a picture, and I think I can understand people not buying into somebody's personality or somebody's approach and get that, but I think more photographers are capable of doing more work than what they're offered, and I try wherever I can to get people to give photographers a chance, because the chances of you having everything in your portfolio that people want is very, very, very slim. I mean, it can even be as tight as a type of headshot. Have you got a backlit headshot in your portfolio? Well, I don't really do backlits, but I know how to do them. Well, I can't give you the job then. So that's the kind of rubbish that you come across. And I think as well, yes, I understand there's money involved, there's budgets involved, there's time involved, there's people's reputation involved. I get all that. But part of not coming out of that situation just breeds stale photography. And you look at a lot of the big magazines particularly use the same photographers, and the work is just exceptionally stale, predictable, stale, and even lazy in some respects. And I think bringing new blood photographers on, it keeps those who are kind of already there on their toes a bit more, but B, it brings a fresh outlook, it brings something new to the table. And you just don't see enough of that anymore. Everything's very safe. The industry as a whole is very safe. And I think part of that comes down to the pigeonholing of photographers and we want food photographer, but he's only photographed trains before. Amazing pictures though, oh, see the pictures. Oh, have you seen that picture? Oh, have you seen it? Give him a chance. No, he's never done that before. We need to stop. Well, the industry needs to not do that, because you're missing out off and losing out on a lot of excellent photographers, I think, in doing that. So there I was around, what we're talking, we're up to about 2012, I think. Was it around then? Yeah. And then my portfolio just kind of grew and grew and grew and grew. But as my portfolio was growing throughout the 2000s, I moved back to Rotherham, my own town, set up a new studio there, and bigger studio, which was nice, and started to attract. Strangely enough, it was difficult to attract as many people as what I got in Manchester, because Rotherham's quite an obscure town up in the north, but it's on the M1 link and close to a train station, so I never quite understood why people would prefer to not come there. But I still managed to get some big names to come and work with me. I still managed to do a lot of fashion. I was still doing a little bit of glamour on the side for money, but eventually I stopped doing that 2012, 13ish, and from a people perspective, focus more on fashion, beauty, portrait, and set up a little magazine at that time called Ascendance Magazine to help myself and up and coming creatives have somewhere to outlet their work, and that worked quite nice for a few years till I got a bit busy and had to sideline it. But as I was kind of developing and shooting more things, I still had to photograph the other stuff. So you can see, I'll just show this little montage collage I put in together, photographing all sorts of things, some creative, some commercial, some for the hell of it, to earn money, to keep my work relevant, to make sure I'd always got something to show people. Never thought in a million years I would enjoy photographing buildings, but when me and my wife Kirsty started going to Liverpool quite regular from 2014-15, I thought the buildings were amazing, so I started photographing them, and that led me to a love of photographing buildings, but looking up at them, not looking at them, getting up to them and looking at them. So I've got a whole series of them places, and every time I go into somewhere, I'm looking up at a building. A more recent example of that is we went to New York on holiday, and we went to our favourite film, so is probably Ghostbusters. Hopefully you all love Ghostbusters. We got to go and see the Ghostbusters firehouse, and of course I took some photographs of the firehouse with the fabulous Ghostbusters sign outside it and whatnot. But me being me, and me being the photographer I am, couldn't resist while I was there photographing the building how I saw it, which is kind of like that. And I don't think you'd probably even know that was the Ghostbusters firehouse if I hadn't told you. But I thought there's an opportunity here to photograph a building from my favourite film, and I'm just going to do it in my style. So I did that as well as doing the other stuff. But again, it's that awareness of yourself as a photographer, that you've got to get the variety in your portfolio for the days when you're skint and people are coming looking for work and you can't show them. Because I fear, as much as I say I think people should now set you on and give you opportunities, the industry as a whole probably won't, because it's quite fixated and stuck in its ways and doesn't like change and likes to go the easy route where they know people are going to deliver. So, you know, my best work, getting back to my work, probably started around 2008-9. Stuff like this here, my people work. Rachel there again, nice little concepts, and Misha doing some fashion stuff, and Kaylee was a great model. She didn't model for too long, she had another life to live, but she was a fabulous model while she modelled. And we did lots of stuff across time. Probably guilty myself of, you know, using the same faces because they were reliable and all that other stuff, but anybody that's worked with models will find that if you can find a muse to work with on many different projects, then you're onto a winner. Amy is now a TV presenter in Dubai, I think, but she started off modelling and did great. Fabulous that we did. That was 2010. So you can see, if I just leave that one up there and go back to, let's find that one of Becky. So 2 fashion photographs that I took, 2007, 2010, and then hopefully there you can see, this one's 2007 on the right, 2010 on the left, the difference in everything in terms of quality, understanding, professionalism that I'd learned in those intervening years. And that was all practice, 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 read, practice, be inspired, practice, learn how to edit, practice editing, get a workflow in camera, workflow on the edit, and become proficient at all that stuff, and always learning, always pushing, and getting to a point where your pictures suddenly start to have a flow and start to have a look, and you can predict what you're going to make, and people start buying into that aesthetic and the qualities that you bring. And these are all, I'm scrolling, these are all 2010. And I think, we kind of, this is, what's the date on that one with Amy? Yeah, January 2011 now. But you can see over that year my people book grew exponentially. This is some work I did for a company called Piamici in London, bespoke fashion house. That's Steph Rycroft Jones. She's another TV presenter now. But you can see those 3.5 years from my early shit to that is the progress I was looking for, and that came through hard work, dedication, reading, learning, being my harshest critic, and making sure that I hammered myself every shoot. So one of the things when you get to the point where you feel like you've kind of reached the quality you want to work at, maintaining that is the most difficult thing. Like anything in life, when things become easier, there's a tendency for us humans to stop trying and rest on our laurels. And I think once I hit this point in 2011, I knew that I wanted to push on and get bigger and better work, and the only way to do that is to maintain the quality of what you've done, but also apply that to all the other stuff that you could possibly do. So while I felt I was a very proficient people photographer, and by that I mean all of the genres of people, and that would be studio, location, fashion, beauty, portrait, lifestyle, glamour, sport, all those things. From that kind of period, I felt like I've nailed it. I can spring on from here. Again, without harping back too much, most of that was my understanding of digital files. And the reason I harp on so much about digital files is the main reason, the main difference in quality, I think, between, let's use this one here of Lloyd. Lloyd's another legend, by the way. And Luca. The main difference between these two is beginning to understand what the hell I was doing post-production, and understanding mainly the histogram. And I bang on a lot about the histogram because I was editing these pictures, the ones on the right here of Lloyd, I was editing those kind of by eye on a screen which is uncalibrated, which is probably too contrasty or too dark or too bright. So when you see it on another screen, it looks underexposed or overexposed or badly coloured. I wasn't looking at the histogram to look for where the real detail was. By the time I got to Luca in 2011, I fully understood the histogram. I knew exactly what it was telling me. So in theory, I could have edited it without a screen just by looking at the histogram and made a better job than I had done with the one on the right hand side. This one on the right side looks better because it's a more recent edit, actually, when I look at them. I'll dig out the unedit and pop it in here so you can see the two side by side. But really, understanding the process of shoot, edit and output, and this goes down to prints as well, didn't really come to me until that point. And so you can clearly see, if I spin through my portfolio quick, this is only a real small selection of my portfolio, mostly my people portfolio, although there is some other bits and bobs here. You find as well, once you understand the photography aspect of it and then understand the edit aspect of it, you can become more creative, and you can do things you didn't think you could do. And that kind of what happens as you go along is you start to become more proficient in gambling and trying things that you might not know work, because you've got the technology and savvy to bring them back if they don't quite work. And a lot of that stuff came out of my understanding of editing and beginning to shoot for the edit. So an example would be, I understood the quality my Canon cameras would produce, so I could shoot knowing exactly the process I would have to use in the edit to get them optimized. And like this picture of Armina Carnier. Armina's a great actress from Canada. You see her in lots of Bollywood style films. Understanding how to get that quality there. 5 years before that, Armina would have looked great, but my shooting edit would have been painful. So understanding that, it was key to me becoming more creative and more adaptable and more exciting, I think, as a photographer. So, you know, I carried on shooting, as you can see. Shot some wonderful people, some awesome things. Even roped in my wife for a few shoots just to make sure she was happy with what I was doing. And then around 2013, I started teaching. I decided I was enjoying teaching. I was doing loads of it privately, but I thought I wanted to do a bit more of this teaching thing. I wonder if there's any work at my local college. So I threw in my CV to the local college, and look, or whatever you might call it, they'd got a vacancy, and I'm still doing that. 11 years on, not at the same place, but still doing that stuff. But because everything I do to the best I can, I realised to become a teacher I need to understand more about the wider issues in photography, not just have to be a good photographer. So as part of doing that, first I got a teaching qualification. I went to university. I was the first person in my family to go to university when I was 43, and got my Cert Ed teaching qual. And then to expand my photography knowledge, understanding and prowess, I went and did a master's degree in photography, and that kind of broad side of my work totally away from people. And I did a project around domesticity, which was looking at my family and my family situation and photographing that. And this is the pictures here. I shot them all on medium format film on a range of different cameras, from Mammayers to Hasselblads to Rolleiflex, and shot a set of lovely medium format film pictures, which I then digitized, blew up to 1 meter square, hung them on my washing line. Well, I printed them out on photocopier paper, glued them together, hung them on the washing line, and that was my presentation for my final MA. But what it did do in investigating all those other things, looking at photographers that installed work in certain places, Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, amazing. Some of the stuff he's done, amazing. But I think my biggest influence at that time, as you can probably tell if you've come across him before, is a guy called Alfred Stieglitz. And he did a set called Equivalence, which is basically a bunch of pictures of the sky, but shot on large format plate glass cameras in the early 1900s. That was my biggest inspiration for this set. But again, this one is just a picture of our washing line in the garden, and everybody always calls it the rabbit picture, which is just a peg and something hanging on the line. But people commented on the framing, the exposure, the noise, because it's shot on film. And when you see that printed a metre square on photocopier paper, it is quite dramatic actually. But what that did in doing a master's degree allowed me to sidestep everything I'd learned so far and learn a whole new bunch of stuff about the history of and the reasons why and the formats and all that other wondrous stuff that comes with the origins of photography being on film, etc. And I love that period, and it kind of coincided with me doing all the lovely building photography I was starting to do. I was getting commissions as well then to do things like food, and food photography was never something, although I do love my food, as you can tell. Food photography was never something it was that old idea of, God, photographing food, are you joking me? But again, once somebody gives you that creative challenge and you understand it from their perspective and what their needs are, you can suddenly start to understand how, hey, this food lot is quite interesting. And it's interesting from a challenge, lighting it, setting it up, dressing it, directing the food. I found it became a big challenge for me. So I did some work for Deliveroo and shot quite a lot of their stuff, which you can still see kicking around in their brochures and whatnot. And I was going to show you the pictures to show you, but I can't find it, and I'm quickly spinning through, so I might have to insert them later. Let me have a look in my junk folder. Yeah, there you go. So I was shooting that kind of stuff for Deliveroo and Co. So that all came out of sideways thinking and trying to get out of the pigeonhole. Although I'm quite happily sometimes pigeonholed as a people photographer, because it does get you work. My supervisor on my MA, brilliant chap called Hugh Hamilton, he's retired now. Great Scottish guy, great photographer as well. He used to say to me, "Why a commercial photographer?" Because at that time all my website and everything was pinned up as a commercial photographer. He'd say, "You're just a photographer. Stop putting that. You're just a photographer." And whenever I said commercial, because I used to say a lot, he would always slap me down and say, "You're a photographer." And he's right. He was always right. But it took me a long time to kind of stop doing that. Some flat lay stuff there I did as part of the delivery work as well. So if I just look at this little things I put together, I must have done these for the website, I think. There's some corporate headshots that I've done over the time. Sarah Champion's the MP in the middle there. The other people are local businessmen. The guy towards the end on the right there, that's Jerry Wiley. He's an actor. Again, stuff that I've done, e-commerce, so security, gaming, jewellery, outfits, dance stuff. That's a bit of my stuff that I've done outside of It's Still People But Not People, so gigs, live theatre, unit stills, corporate again, that kind of stuff, and family. Must have not finished that one, but there's some family stuff in there. So I've done quite a lot over time, particularly over the last 10 years, and got myself to a point, I think, where I can hold my own in any genre. The only genre I wouldn't really put myself as being a master of yet is street photography. And while some people do say my street photography stuff's great, they love it, the reason I say that is because I am what we call a shit scared street photographer. Generally in life I'm very confident and I can have a confrontation with anybody and I can hold my own in any argument. But there's something I dislike about walking around the streets and pointing a camera in somebody's face. My biggest inspiration in terms of street photography is a guy who's dead now sadly, called William Klein. He was in New York, Bronx, and did all that stuff. There's a famous picture of his where he goes up to some kids and the kids have got a gun and he takes a picture. And although it was staged, the fact that he could walk up to these kids and do that with balls of steel amazes me. And I've tried to be that person. I've tried to be that photographer who walks up to people in the street and goes snap in their face. I just can't do it. I just don't have I don't know what it is. I just care too much, I think, about their feelings. So, but I love street photography. I love it. And I was thinking, how the hell can I become a street photographer and do street photography and do it well, be decent without doing that? So I stumbled across a guy from America called called Eric Kim. And Eric Kim didn't invent this, but does a lot of something called shooting from the hip. It's basically walking around with your camera by your side, by your hip, and just pointing it and taking pictures. So I thought, what if that could work? Now, it works, but it's very hit and miss, as you might know, because when you don't know quite what you're looking at and focusing can be all over. Sometimes you miss somebody altogether. But I think, for me, that way of doing it, it kind of gives you a more real view of what you've taken. None of these people know I was taking the picture, because I haven't got the balls to go up to them and say, I'm taking your picture, or not even speak to them. So these are all taken from me swinging the camera by my hip, or by my chest, or sometimes by the floor, or sometimes while I'm pretending to tie my shoelaces. And I think you get a much more natural, picture because there's no response. You're getting the picture you've seen rather than the picture you see once they've clocked you and they're looking at you. And when I went to New York with my wife Kirsty in April, I kind of took that approach, because I don't have the balls to have any other approach to that kind of photography. And although there's some hit and miss in there, I think that was on Brooklyn Bridge. That one of the two guys, it just makes me laugh, because that's just what photographers are like. You know, are they saying, what's that load of shit, or great shot, man, or what were your settings for that? And I just find it very hilarious that I snuck a picture of them as I walked past. They didn't have a clue, but they were doing what photographers do, and I kind of love that. And yes, you know, I had a modicum of success. I really liked some of the pictures. That was a guy giving away free haircuts in Central Park, which is just a great idea, isn't it? I mean, hopefully people gave him some money, but the free haircuts thing's great. And just people going about the business, and I think is much more, what's the phrase, interesting than, I mean, I managed to bump into the old naked cowboy. But again, people were stopping and talking to him, and I thought I'll get a side-on picture of him talking to people rather than a picture of him looking at me, which is what everybody tries to get, just to get something different. But I think when people don't know you're taking the picture, they carry on. They're just doing life. I mean, this guy was like an old Keir Starmer lookalike. I don't know who he was or what he was. He was just there, so I took his picture. And I found that kind of approach worked really well in New York, because my wife had researched and said to me, you can't stop in New York. And I said, what do you mean you can't stop in New York? So if you stop, somebody will walk into you or just knock you over. It's that busy. And she was right. So to stop and take a picture is pretty impossible in New York. So I just ran with that idea of walk slowly, have a shutter. Shutter was about 400, 500, 600 of a second. It was a pretty fast shutter. And just get what I got. And I took about 1,500 pictures and edited 600, so the hit rate was actually pretty good. When I'm doing studio photography, I normally work on a 1 in 10 ratio. So the fact that I edited 600 out of 1,500 is a much better hit ratio. And again, I see in buildings, but you know, I would never call myself a street photographer. I'm a photographer who does his own style of street photography based on what others have done before, but I'm not a street photographer. But if somebody said to me, are you a food photographer? I would say, yes, I can do food. If somebody said to me, are you a product photographer? Yes, I can do that. Flat lay? Yeah. Oh, portraits? Absolutely. Real estate? Not a problem. But I'm a little bit less confident with street photography. And I think that's because it's my quirk of doing it. Results can be a bit hit and miss, but I think more interesting. And William Klein, for me, was the best, and I wish I'd got the balls he had, but unfortunately for me, I don't. I'm a weakling when it comes to that, and I'm quite happy to admit it. So, to finish off, really, where does that take us up to? I mean, we were up to the mid-2010, 12, 13, 14s, weren't we? The point I try to make over all this is, don't pigeonhole yourself as a photographer. The truth is, if you learn photography and all types of photography, you'll become better at some of it than others. But you'll still be good enough at it to make a living, and still be good enough at it to justify touting yourself as a whatever photography you like. What's the best way to advertise yourself? Currently I've got 2 websites. I've got a website, burkittphoto.com, which just focuses on my people photography. because it's it's what I do best. It's what I enjoy the most, and I think to bring that slightly to one side, to just show people my portfolio there, works for me. I have a link back to my other website, lanceburkitt.com, where I have a myriad of other things that I do. So this is advertised on there. This podcast also, I have on there the other quirks I do, dog photography, products, weddings, all the other stuff's there, and my teaching stuff's there as well. So that's how I kind of do it now. I'm not quite as much of a split personality as I was in the mid 2013, 14, 15s, and as my supervisor, Hugh Hamilton, rightly said, stop having a split personality, you're a photographer, not a commercial, not a this, not a that, other. And he was right. But I found having two spaces online for my predominant stuff and the other stuff I can do kind of works for me. So I'd say do that how you want, do it how you like, works for you, but make sure you don't pigeonhole yourself to just being a band photographer, or just being a glamour photographer, or just being a whatever it is, sky photographer, because I guarantee you, if you're producing high quality pictures of any of those genres, you can do it with them all. A bit more practice, a bit more sideways thinking, a bit more pushing yourself. Keep going, keep learning. That's the key thing, to learn. Make sure your processes go from A to Z and are repeatable, and you can attack any genre. And if, like me, you know, when I started, if you're just starting out now and you're feeling like you're at the Sunday League table and you want to get to Premier League, the best advice I would give you is stop reading internet forums, stop looking at quirky, brilliant, oh look at this stuff on YouTube. Doesn't have to be me. I'm not saying it should be me. There's lots of good teachers out there. Find somebody who knows what the bloody hell they're on about. Look at the quality of their work. Look at their work over a period of time, and learn either yourself or off people who can walk the walk. Stop learning off people with... I saw some tutorials the other day on TikTok, for example, and you know the style. They've got a smartphone. The guy's down on the floor. He's making a funny shape. He's shooting through a bog roll. They put some clouds over there with some fluff, and he's going, oh, look at this. And new photographers are looking at that going, oh my God, I wish I could only do that. I wish I could do that. You are never, ever, ever, ever going to get paid commissions photographing stuff like that. Ever. It's just not going to happen. Might look good on TikTok, might look good on YouTube, but there's no magazine editor, no product owner ever going to come to you and say, do that for me. They're just not. So, wherever you can, walk away from those piss poor YouTube videos and TikTok videos. If you want to learn quirks, do it as an hobby. If you want to learn serious photography, find yourself a really good tutor. There are lots out there. Look at their body of work. Do some wider research. Read books. Read the older books. Go and dig out Ansel Adams' books on exposure and how he figured out his system. Go and read that. Look at the intricacies of exposure. Look at Guy Gowan's stuff. Learn from a proper professional how to edit. And then put it all in the mix and shoot upwards, sideways, downwards. Become good at shooting everything. Specialise in stuff you enjoy the most. Do the most of what you enjoy the most. But you're always going to have to earn money as a photographer. And if you can go sideways, that's great. If you can do a little bit of that to a good degree, you'll survive. Unless you're extremely lucky and you get the big gigs from day one, which some people do. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, it does, but it's rare. Diversify yourself. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Obliterate that pigeonhole. The pigeonhole should be a myth. And if you're pigeonholing yourself right now, the only person you're hurting is yourself. Step away from the pigeonhole. Be a photographer. A photographer. You're a drawer with light. You draw shit with light. That's all you need to be. That's all you should be doing. Everything else is just meh. Alright? So, I hope you enjoyed a quick whistle-stop tour across my journey. If ever you want to hear any more, or you want to ask questions, feel free to ping them in. And that's it for today. Luckily for me, I'm actually in Rome right now as this has been published. I'm in Rome this week, and I'm going to be doing lots of street photography. Me and my wife Kirsty. Kirsty's the photographer's widow. In case you haven't seen that before, my book, Photographer's Widow, has a real good foreword in it from Kirsty, and she explains what it's like living with a photographer and being a photographer's widow. And we've got a lovely holiday this week coming up in Rome, and my camera will be coming with us, and Kirsty will unfortunately be a photographer's widow for much of that week. But she knows me by now. She knows what I'm like. So when I come back next week, I might do a little blog about street photography. That will my podcast next time probably about street photography and how I'm a frustrated William Klein, but not a bad Eric Kim. So keep shooting, guys. Keep learning. Catch you all soon. Cheers.